Alright, so for today's video, I want to show you this custom spray paint material and custom node group that I've set up. And over here, I'm going to give a quick demonstration. You got two different base colors you can choose from. The top one's the main color and the bottom one's more of a tint color. Then we have two different metallic sliders to control each of those separately. We also have two different glossiness sliders which control whether or not the paint is going to be matte or glossy. And you can see the texture coming through due to the bump node. And here we have more of an example of a metallic spray paint. But you can do matte, glossy, even have clear coats, even make chrome and a mirror effect. So I'll show you how to do that now. Alright, so to get the scene set up, I'm just going to go over to render and set this to cycles, and I have my denoiser turned on in the viewport. In the world properties, I have this HDRI from Polyhaven Lakeside Knot. I have the strength set to 0.3. And back over in render, if you go down to film, I'm going to set it to transparent so we don't see that HDRI in the background. Under output, I have this set by 1920 by 1920. And I have this area light just kind of angled towards the origin of the world. If we go under the light properties, we have power set to 30 watts. I'm going to Shift A and add an icosphere and set the subdivisions to 5. And I'm going to shade it smooth. And over here, if we press N, I'm going to set all the dimensions to 1 meter. And I'm going to select this, Control A, and apply the scale. Alright, so if we press 0 on the numpad, I have my camera set up to look directly at the sphere. In the Shading tab, just click over here on New Material. I'm going to just drag this over so we can see better. Alright, so I'm going to Shift A and add a noise texture. And I'm also going to add a color ramp. And if we click the noise texture with the node wrangler enabled, Control T to add texture coordinate and mapping nodes. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to put object to the vector. I'm going to connect this noise texture to the factor of the color ramp. I'm just going to come over here, drag these over, and I'm going to search for a mixed color node. I'm going to plug the color of the color ramp into the factor and the result into the principled BSDF. I'm going to Control Shift click on the color ramp to preview it and switch this over to material preview. We can see our noise texture coming through now. I'm going to adjust this slider over just to about here to give it a little more contrast. Alright, so on our noise texture, I want this scale to be a huge number, like in the thousands. But I don't want to have to adjust that with a slider or type in a very high number. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to Shift A and search for a math node. I'm going to stick it right here and change this to multiply and plug this value into the scale of our noise texture. Set the bottom value to 100 and the top value to 30. That way it'll multiply those together and we'll get 3,000. And this will be good later so we can adjust this by a smaller number instead of some ridiculous large number. If we unplug this real quick and change the scale to 3,000, we can see that it's exactly the same. So this multiply node is working properly. Alrighty, so come over here and I'm just going to change these two colors. It doesn't matter, it can be whatever color you want. I'm just going to go with a red for this demonstration. I'm going to make color B a little bit darker than color A. That way it gives it a little more variation due to that noise texture factor. I re-enable the BSDF by Control Shift clicking on it. And if we zoom in, we can see that we have this little bit of texture detail due to the factor. Now I can change this color B so you can see it a little better. You can see these little black specks in here. I'm just going to change it back to red. Maybe a little darker. Alright, that's good for now. All right, so the next thing I want to do is be able to control the metallic and the roughness sliders. But I want to do it by the factor of our color ramp. That way we have a little bit more control over the texture itself and add a little more detail for some realism. So I'm going to add a mixed color node and plug that color ramp into the factor and plug that result into the metallic. And I'm going to click on this and Shift D to duplicate it and just bring it down here. I'm going to connect the color ramp up to the factor and the result to the roughness. Alright, so you can see if we change these, it's going to change them according to the factor. So color A is going to be the main effect, and color B will be a lesser effect of the metallic and the roughness. You can get some pretty cool variations by doing this. And if we zoom in, you can kind of see the effect. You can see where I have that black value. It is a lot more shiny, and we can adjust these however we want later on to make our paint really pop and add a little bit of a metallic flake look to it. I'm just going to backspace by hovering over these to reset them all to the default, and we'll change them up later. Alright, so I'm going to go and add a bump node, and I'm going to take that color ramp output and plug it up to the hot. I'm going to take the output and plug it into the normal of our BSDF. I'm going to zoom in, and I want to change the strength of this to 0.1. We can see it's adding a little bit of a texture here now. It's a little bit too textured for paint, so I'm going to come over here to the noise texture. And now I'm going to change that detail up. I'm going to change it all the way to 15. And I'm going to change the roughness to 1. Now we can see it smoothed that out a little bit, but still give us just enough texture, because spray paint, even though it's smooth, it still has a little bit of texture because it's drops of paint being applied to whatever you're painting. Alright, so here's the node group so far. And now I'm going to show you how to make these into a custom node group. That way you can adjust these values very quickly. I'm going to just put this to solid shading real quick, and then I'm going to make this bigger. Select all of these and hit Control G to group them all into a node group together. Now we can start plugging stuff up into this group input. Alright, so I'm going to bring this over here, and the first thing I want to add are these two base colors. So I'm just going to plug those up, and if we press N, we can see we can change the names of these to whatever you want. I'm going to call this color A and color B. I'm just going to leave that red as the default, but you can change it to whatever you want. Alright, now for the metallic, I'm just going to take these two colors. I'm going to plug those up and change the names of these. I'm just going to call it metallic 1 and metallic 2. And instead of color for the top, I'm going to change it to float for both of these. I'm going to type in 0 for the min and 1 for the max. I'm going to do the same thing for the other one, and I'm going to leave the default to 0. If we click on our node group and press tab, we can go see what we've done. Bring this down here and plug up the roughness as well. And I'm going to do the same thing as the metallic. I'm going to change them both to float. And change the names. I'm going to call this glossiness 1. And then glossiness 2. And change the top to float. And set this to 0 for min and max to 1. And I'm going to change the default to a 0.1. I'm going to do the same exact thing for the other one. So we tab back into our node, we can see we've got our glossiness now. I'm just going to expand this over. Now we can see it's between 0 and 1. We press backspace to reset it to the default. I'm just going to change the name of this node group and call it Spray Paint 1. And this is a different name than the material, so you can change the material up there as well. I'm just going to leave it like this for now. Alright, so now I'm going to take the bump strength and plug that up into here. I'm going to come over here, just rename this to bump strength. I'm going to leave everything else at the default. And in the video, I actually have the bump strength set to 0.1, but it needs to be set to 0.01, and I'll fix that later on. I'm going to come over here and plug up the top value of our multiply node and then rename that to texture scale. And I have the default set to 30, so now we can just put in a reasonable number instead of something that's in the thousands, and it'll multiply it by this bottom value and give us the scale of our texture. I'm going to plug up the detail and rename that to texture detail. And I have the default for 15. We tab into our node group, make sure it's all looking good. I'm going to plug up the roughness. We can control that as well. I'm going to call it texture roughness. And I'm going to leave the default at 1. I'm going to bring this on over here. I'm going to slide this BSDF and the output out of the way so we can have a little more room to work. I'm going to go under coat on our BSDF. I'm going to plug in the weight, and I'm going to plug in the roughness and the tint, and we can control all these. That way we can have a clear coat effect on our spray paint. And just rename these real quick to whatever you want. I'm just going to call it clear coat weight, clear coat roughness, and clear coat tint. I'm going to bring this back over here. If we tab back into our node, we can see what we've got so far. And I actually need to change the roughness of that coat. So I'm going to go under here and set the default to 0. And if we hit tab, we can go back into the node, hit the backspace, and it'll change it back to its default value. And make sure everything's set at its default value. Alright, so here's an example. This is sockles, and we can see that the bump texture is giving a little bit of distortion to this light source. And that's how spray paint is in real life. It's not really a perfect reflection. Alright, so here's an example of this mirror without the bump strength, and you can see that you can create a mirror with this material. I just have these set to gray, and the metallic all the way up, and the glossiness full gloss. And then I have bump strength set to 0 and everything else the same. And we can see it's given this nice reflective mirror. But if we want like a chrome effect, we need to have that bump strength. So I've reset that to 0.01, everything else the same. Because chrome doesn't reflect perfectly in real life. It's a little bit blurry. And this material also works in Eevee. So if you're using Eevee, this is just the material preview. We can see it's a full mirror here. If we set the bump strength to a 0.01, we have a little bit of a blur, so you can kind of simulate that chrome look as well. I'm going to reset these back to the default value. And if we zoom in, we can see this red paint material in Eevee. So this material works pretty good in Eevee and sockles as well. Now I'll show you how the clear coat works. If we change the clear coat weight to 1, we can see this little glossiness come over and give it a little bit more gloss than our roughness. And it does it without changing the roughness of the material, so you can get a really nice paint effect, and I'll show you that in a little bit. You can also change the clear coat roughness, so if you want more of a matte clear coat than a full gloss, you can do that as well. We can also change the tint of the clear coat. So if you want like a certain color, you can change that and you can still see the red underneath it. Even if you use a color like blue or green. Alright, so here's an example of this metallic kind of spray paint. This would look good on like a car or some type of vehicle. And I'm going to show you the difference between this and having the clear coat. So you see, if we add a clear coat, it gives it this nice little bit of reflective gloss without changing the actual roughness of the surface beneath. So you can create a really nice painted look without changing the actual way the light reflects off of the material. Another good example of how you could use this is Christmas tree ornaments, stuff like that, with that reflective look. And here's just another example of this purple paint and how you can have two different base colors both come through at the same time. I have these two different purples and you can see they're both coming through pretty good. And you can set these values to whatever you want just to get a really nice paint result, and it's very customizable. So that's pretty much it. I appreciate you for watching, and like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this.